I will open the meeting. We're just starting a little bit late, but that's all okay. I think we've got a quorum, don't we? Yes. So I'd like to advise everyone that we are recording live to the community, and if you could just wait for me to announce you before you're speaking, and I also request that your mobile devices are turned off or to silent. We have apologies or leave of absences from Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates. Councillor Sherlock is online. Hi, Councillor Sherlock, which is as part of the COVID rules that we're allowed to still come in online. And Councillor Fox is attending, I think, but just late. So that's everyone, I think. Otherwise, everyone else is present. I'd like to start with our acknowledgement to country. So in recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting tonight, and recognise the determination of the Palawa people of Tasmania who have survived invasion and dispossession. And I'd just like to recognise elders past and present as well. Thank you. So the minutes of our last meeting, which was the 11th of October, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Barakis. All those in favour of the minutes as written, say aye. Aye. Against, say no. That's carried unanimously. Transfer of agenda items. Are there any items proposed for transfer? On either the open or the closed, there being none. Communications from the Chair. I do have a communication. I'd like to, tonight I'd like to pay tribute to celebrated Czech Tasmanian artist Tom Samek, who passed away recently. Born in Prague, Tom moved to Tasmania at the age of 21. He described himself as a painter, sculptor, printmaker, mural artist, theatre set designer and film animator. Tom was behind some of Tasmania's most well-known artworks and some of Hobart's most well-known artworks, including the floor mural, The Flawed History of Tasmanian Wine at Meadowbank Estate. The council had a lot of dealings with Tom, including we commissioned Tom to undertake 3 projects: the Wellington Court Playground in 1997, the Goldfish Railway Roundabout Fountain Pool Mosaic in 2013. Jeff Parr was the original designer of the fountain, specified that when it was refurbished in 2013, he wanted Tom to redo his own work done 50 years earlier. And also the Foxtrot Polka Dot project, which was done in collaboration with Tom O'Hearn. Officers call it the Tom and Tom Wall, and it's located on the ramp leading from the Wellington Court to the Argyle Street car park. Tom was an artist of great diversity and immense skill, and above all else, Tom was a very much valued member of the Hobart artistic community who will be greatly missed.
Lord Mayor, can I suggest that we have a minute's silence, please?
Lord Mayor, I wonder if we also could send the appropriate communication from yourself to the family, as we did with Bill Meehan's family, acknowledging and perhaps a copy of your words. Yep.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good idea. Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Okay, now moving on to council workshops, notification of council workshops. We haven't had any council workshops since our last meeting. Agenda item number 5 is public question time. Now, I think we have 2 that we've received. So can I invite?
Oh, sorry.
I think we do the public questions time first. So we have received one from Mr. Andrew Swan. Mr. Swan, are you here? No, so Mr. Swan isn't here, so we have his question though, and will that be? Hold it over, yes, okay. And then second one we have from Louise Elliott. Thank you, Ms. Elliott.
I have 2 questions, if possible, please, to the Council. The first question relates to UTAS's move into the CBD. UTAS's urban design framework document that covers its move into the CBD outlines dramatic changes to our city. These changes will no doubt be welcomed by some, while being forcibly imposed on others to their detriment. Some of these changes include UTAS's intention to develop Melville Street as a pedestrian priority street and to expand their property portfolio to a dozen large prime real estate sites in the central CBD. The community is already seeing UTAS's wishes coming to fruition through the removal of considerable on-street parking in Elizabeth Street, with more similar plans underway. Can the Council please advise what, if any, assurances the Council or its representatives have given UTAS that their plans outlined in their urban design framework are or will be supported by the Council? What is the Council's understanding of what making Melville Street pedestrian priority means in real terms? For example, is this blocking the street to traffic, making the street one way, and or removing some or all parking? What, if any, plans do the Council have to consult with residents and businesses in the areas impacted by UTAS's plans? Given UTAS's broad exemption from paying local government rates, how does the Council expect UTAS's move to the city to impact on rates revenue? In particular, what rates does the Council estimate would be payable if the real estate currently and proposed to be occupied by UTAS in the CBD was instead occupied by a party that did not have exemption from paying rates? Or put another way, how much rates income is UTAS's move to the CBD costing in terms of missed rates revenue? What, if any, properties in the Hobart LGA does UTAS currently pay rates on, and what is the value of those rates? And my second question relates to elected member allowances. In April 2020, a motion was put forward by the Lord Mayor and Councillor Sherlock seeking that all elected members take a voluntary 20% reduction in their allowance. The motion was lost with the Lord Mayor and Councillor Sherlock, Dutta and Ewan Fox voting in support of the motion. Can the Council please advise if this motion needed to be supported in order for elected members to action a voluntary reduction in their allowance, or was it possible for members to take their own independent action without this motion being supported? Assuming that members could reduce their allowance without this motion being supported, can the Council please advise which, if any, of the 4 elected members that voted in support of this motion actioned a voluntary reduction in their allowance since April 2020 and the value of the reduction made? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Elliott. I will take the questions on notice today and provide you with a full written response in due course. A copy of the response will be published in a future Council agenda for the Council to receive and note. And just to note that one of the reasons for taking it on notice is that your question was received this morning. So under our questions on notice, ideally we would prefer them on at close of business on Friday, and particularly that's particularly the case when there's quite an in-depth and complex range of questions as yours have been tonight. Thank you so much, and we'll get a response to you. Okay, item 5.2 is responses to public questions taken on notice. Moved by Alderman Zuko, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Petitions is item number 6, and I think we do have a petition. CEO, if you could read that for us.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We do indeed have one petition this evening received from Mr Dustin Moore from Lena Valley. The subject matter relates to making Augusta Road, Lena Valley, safe for all road users, and the action sought by the petitioners is as follows. In order to prevent a serious injury or death to a non-vehicle road user, as well as reduce crashes generally, I'm calling on Hobart City Council to firstly monitor and gather vehicle travel speeds on the section of Augusta Road between Giblin Street and Athleen Avenue, investigate and report on crash data on the section of Augusta Road between Giblin Street and Athleen Avenue since the installation of the pedestrian refuge in June 2015. Investigate and implement within a reasonable time frame in consultation with the local community a multimodal solution for the section of Augusta Road between Giblin Street and Athleen Avenue that is nationally consistent with safe system infrastructure and knowledge, which may involve but is not limited to reducing opportunities for vehicles speeding, providing separated and protected cycleways and planting street trees. And Lord Mayor, there are a total number of 73 signatures to the petition. Thank you.
So, Deputy Lord Mayor?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I believe this matter is on the agenda for infrastructure services on Wednesday, is it not?
I'm not sure. Mr Doyle?
Look, the actual matter itself is not that I'm aware of, but certainly Augusta Road has had significant discussions in the past. I think the petition was referred to the committee.
Yeah, thank you. I had thought that it might have been on the agenda, so I've obviously misread the agenda, but I'll refer it to the committee for the appropriate response. Thank you.
Sure. So seconded by Alderman Barakis. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Supplementary items, there are none for our open agenda. Moving on now to indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest. Do any elected members wish to declare an interest in any item appearing on our open council agenda? There being none, we will move on now to the City Planning Committee items, and I'll note now that the council is acting as a planning authority and invite Deputy Lord Mayor to open item 9.1, which is 26 Newdigate Street, North Hobart.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. This is for approval of partial demolition, alterations and extension to this property at 26 Newdigate Street.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Lord Mayor, the report from officers based on heritage was for refusal. There was quite a lot of discussion and deputations at committee, and it was felt by it was a split vote, majority of committee members that this was suitable for approval, given given the conditions that we have before us on the main agenda. One of the things was to try and reduce the impact, so the pallet was seen to be at the discretion of the director in relation to the two-storey extension onto this Georgian house. And whilst there are some things that did concern me in relation to the asymmetry of the development or the additions, I felt that some of the reasoning behind that sort of practicality of having still retaining a backyard, and you can see there's advice in relation to tree coverage and maintaining that, and also the way that it's designed so that there's enough light coming into the back part of that building, so where the extension is. So whilst it was recommended for refusal, I think this the pragmatic side of me suggests that this is a suitable thing to approve this evening.
Okay, further discussion? If there's no further discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
All those in favour, show of hands.
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Councillor Dutta. It's carried, Lord Mayor, 9 votes to 1.
Okay, moving on to item 10, petition to rezone 21B part of 21A Enterprise Road, Sandy Bay. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I'd like to move that this recommendation be accepted.
By Alderman Thomas.
Lord Mayor, you'll remember that there was earlier this year a decision in relation to a refusal of a development application on this area of Enterprise Road. So it was, I think, 20 apartments, two-storey apartments, I think, on a fairly or an area that had previously been zoned low density residential, and through various iterations of the planning schemes there had been some changes so that that was, whilst discretionary, was a significant increase in what really is quite an assault or quite a demand on that sort of high or up near the fringes of Mount Nelson, essentially. So there were the petition that we considered, so it had 208 signatures, and they requested a planning scheme amendment to be initiated to progress the rezoning. And so there were various justifications and again good deputations to support their claim, and the officers feel that there are merits in justifying changes to or making these planning scheme amendments. However, there is, as you can see in the report at 5.6, those current resourcing constraints preclude immediate further investigation into this amendment. I certainly took heart at the committee meeting, because the director did suggest that there would be new staffing resources to be coming on in the new year, but we have heard from the representatives and the residents around this area who feel that they want more certainty, because this might come back, you know, there might be another development application, you have to go through the whole process of considering it under the current planning scheme requirements. So timely, and it's really good to see a very well organised group of the community who are concerned and want to improve Hobart for its particular planning implications in this fairly sensitive area. So I'll move it and wait for further discussion.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, look, yes, I do agree with the deputy there that very rational emails we've been getting from the residents up there, very well argued, pointing out the history of the site and indicating that over a number of years council officers have always considered that part of the hill to be low density hill face or environmental living or and so on. It somehow managed with the interim planning scheme to be considered to be residential density too. So look, I think I've talked to a few of the representatives up there, or the petitioners up there, and they do believe there should be a timeline in the motion. So I intend to move, and whilst we've got some detailed approaches suggested by the petitioners, I have talked to the planning department this afternoon, and it still believes that whichever way we go, it's still going to take some time, whether it's 6 months or whatever. But if we put a timeline for the report into our motion, something like it says as a matter of high priority, with a timeline of the report to come back to council by the 1st of March. Now that's achievable. I've talked to the director there, and perhaps he should confirm it, because we did have a conversation on the phone. I may have misunderstood him, but if we have a timeline of the 1st of March for the report, is that achievable?
Mr. Noy?
Yes, Lord Mayor, look, I believe so, and we'd like to better that, but it does depend on when that resourcing will be coming online. We're hopeful that it will be coming on sooner rather than later, so we'd like to think we could get the report to earlier than the 1st of March, but so, yep.
Alderman Briscoe, what's the wording of your
the
amendment?
wording is at the appropriate place there. So the report be prepared as a matter of high priority with a deadline.
No later than?
No later than the 1st of March. Yeah, that would do it. And it's still we should take out when the required resourcing is available, because it will be available. Yeah. So just a high priority with a deadline of 1st of March. The petitioners did. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, CEO had a request for your...
Yes. All right, what was the request?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. To you, Alderman Briscoe, I'm just wondering if we can be a little bit flexible on March, not specifically the 1st of March, but rather receive a report within the month of March.
Well, I've just asked that. Look, I'll have to be guided by you, CEO. But the director did say he would achieve it by the 1st of March. So, let's say, using your words, CEO, if I take that on board. Now, the other thing is that the petitioners have sort of said, well, why can't we go out to an independent planner? It may cost $6,000 or $7,000 or less. And the answer I got from the director, and perhaps he should confirm it, that by the time we went through all the processes of tendering, getting a tender document together, going out to tender, getting at least 2 quotes, it wouldn't achieve any increase in or decrease in time that the report would be written. Could you just confirm that, Director, through you, Lord Mayor?
Yes, that's correct, Lord Mayor. It could take longer, and knowing what work consultants have on at the moment and struggling to find staff, it might be serve to delay it even further.
Thank you. Now, I don't think my amendment had a second, Lord Mayor.
Second by Councillor Harvey.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got Alderman Baracus.
So just a quick question before I speak, just in regards to the timelines and the amendment. The director, and through you, Lord Mayor, to the director, it was said that we'd be able to meet that deadline. Would we be meeting that deadline without pushing out any other important work that we're doing? Because that would be my only concern. Otherwise, I've got no sort of serious issue.
No.
This is important.
Yeah. Look. Clearly, it will take up staff time that could be doing other things, but it's a question of priority, and that'll be a matter for council to provide advice, and also the CEO to instruct as appropriate.
Further discussion, Alderman Baracus.
Thank you. Look, I'll speak to the substantive item. I denied about this in committee last week. I think typically I don't feel particularly comfortable about rezoning people's properties from underneath them. I think when you purchase a piece of, when you purchase land, you purchase property, and then it gets, you purchase it with a certain idea of what you're able to do on it, and for that to be changed under you, I think is something that doesn't normally sit well with me. At the same, and as well as that, I'll note that there was a clearly inappropriate development that was put forward in this site, and the rules of the day also prevented that from being passed as well. But at the same time, having met with all the residents in that area, and since that development application, and looking at what they presented, and looking into the history of that site, it is also pretty clear that there is a mismatch of zoning there, and what the current zoning there isn't appropriate. Hence why I was somewhat torn on this one. But noting that this motion is to prepare a report back to council discussing the matter, I think it's best that we do get down to the bottom of it at the very least, and look if there's a more appropriate zoning, or if there's a better way to go about this. And I would just hope that in the midst of all this process that the owner of the property would have some engagement and some involvement with this as well. So I've got no problem supporting this today, Lord Mayor.
Any further discussion? Okay, I might put the amendment first before I ask Deputy if they'd like to sum up. So I'll put the amendment, which is that basically the words "when the required resourcing is available" is deleted, and it's replaced with "no later than March" is added. Is that right? All those in favour of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Councillor Fox, it's carried, Lord Mayor, 9 votes to 1.
Okay, Deputy, did you want to sum up?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think it's a really common sense approach with this amendment, and just in response to Alderman Barakis with these changes undermining what position or what somebody can or can't do with their land. Planning schemes, I've got to say, in my almost 17 years on council, are very imprecise documents and instruments, so they're not a perfect thing. That's why we've got an amendment before us, so that's why things do change, and we see that time and time again when we have planning scheme changes. The Tasmanian planning provisions obviously are changes that we see, so it's an evolving thing, as our city is.
Okay, so then I'll move the substantive motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Now moving on to item 11, the Central Hobart Precincts Plan Discussion Paper. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, I'll move the motion as it is.
Second by Alderman Thomas.
So, Lord Mayor, on the 4th of March in 2019, the Minister for Planning came to, or wrote to Council to look at how we might look at building heights and progressing the city deal strategic approach to urban growth through the development of comprehensive precinct plans. And we had a discussion on the 8th of April in that same year, where the Minister tabled an indicative scoping document developed between the officers and the Council and State Government. And then Council considered that a report on the outcomes from that meeting, and we decided to go ahead with a part-funded and in-kind contribution for the Central Hobart Precincts Plan. And so this is the 64 blocks of the city from Macquarie Street to Burnett Street, and from the Brooker over to Harrington Street. Or
further.
Pardon?
I think it's to Mole Street, but
Mole and Harrington.
Yeah.
Okay. So and this report is quite comprehensive. So we're looking at what we'd like to see for that area of our city when it comes in 20 years' time. So this is the document, and the suggestion is that tonight we send this out to the public for public consideration, not only the community but significant stakeholders, various stakeholders, including the corporate sector and property owners and so forth. So this aligns with our community vision, but it also gives us the opportunity to be very strategic about how we use that fairly poorly utilised land, how in some places how we improve the infrastructure and the transport into this area. So a very comprehensive plan, and it's now time to get the community and various stakeholders' input. So I commend this to Council.
Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I also commend this to Council. It was quite an extensive debate quite a while ago in regards to this, and I think this is one way for this Council to go forward on what's best for the city. I understand the Deputy Lord Mayor has mentioned stakeholders, the corporate sector and all that. Lord Mayor, I want to ensure that that's in the motion. I'm not being pedantic, but just using the word community, to my point of view, could be just taken in a simpler wording. I would like to move an amendment that it's the community and stakeholders, being the residents, land owners, and the commercial and corporate sector. I'd like those words added past community, and a part 2 that this work is done as part of the Council's communications policy as well. I'd like that in there to ensure that it's very, very clear and defined on what we're going to do here, because we don't want to see anyone missed out off the plate, in particular our commercial sector and our corporate sector. As we well know, very soon you'll know my reasons why, how important it is of our CBD to our rates base. So I move that as an amendment.
Alderman Zuko, have you got the wording for that?
I can provide the wording. Just give me a moment.
I was actually just going to ask that that get read out again, Lord Mayor. That was...
Sorry?
Can you read?
I'll read out again. After the word community, right, and relevant stakeholders being residents, landowners, and the commercial and corporate sector, right, full stop, and part 2, in accordance with Council's communications policy. I'll just send that to the Mr. Jackson just now. Give me a moment.
Discussion.
Was there any second to the motion?
Oh, seconded it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to second it. Just a comment, Lord Mayor. A document as good as this, and it's very embracive, and it's got an awful lot of different issues to be encompassed in it. I don't know whether or not the authors have worked out or thought there might be some value in trying to not segment commentary, but when someone comes in, and we've already heard the demand on the section that we're likely to be dealing with this, is there any way, or have the authors thought about how people should be responding? We're not going to curtail people's opinion, but there's such a breadth of issues here. Is there a way in which, when it goes out, we can somehow, not quarantine, but somehow get some order in the way people come back? Otherwise it'll take weeks to segment which bit related to which bit of the paper. And I just say it would seem a good way to do it when the document gets as big as this, whether it's done in a form of an instruction that goes out, if you've got particular issues, or if you just agree with the whole thing, say I love it.
Oh.
But I think there's ways in which we could be much more systematic in terms of calling for the response.
Ms. Hoke, did you want to respond to that, or? Yes, please.
Yes, through you, Chair. So we've got a number of ways of engaging with the community and key stakeholders. We'll have a survey that will be published tomorrow at if it's agreed to publish this document and launch it. We'll step through the city shaping goals, and we'll ask for opinion on those at a high level. We'll ask for opinion on a section of the more key potential future directions that we think, like the one that's around bringing an additional 7,000 people. So we'll track to those sort of newer ones that haven't been consulted before, but also provide an open opportunity for people to comment on any of the potential future directions. And then we've also got some specific questions about the precincts themselves. So that's the survey, and we'll be conducting workshops as well. There'll be 3, one with community, one with the general community, one with the business community, and another one with community groups. And they'll be tailored as well. We'll tailor questions that we think those particular stakeholders will be interested in.
Thank you. Thanks.
Further discussion, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question off the back of that. Would those community groups that were the consultation, would that include groups such as Shelter Tascos that would have an interest in especially housing affordability in that space?
Through you, Chair, yes, definitely. So we'll also be writing to all landowners and occupiers, and writing to various community groups, inviting them to the workshops. We're also tapping into the existing community groups that the City of Hobart supports. So so we've already had some preliminary conversations, say, with Shelter Tas to tell them that the paper is coming out. Yep.
So, I don't know if the council feels that it'd be necessary to include that in just for clarity. I think it is important that those groups are definitely included, but it does seem that they would be already.
Not they are, Lord Mayor, but again, for clarity, I'd like to include those in my amendment, because I want to make sure that, you know, it's defined that we're going to contact everybody. And I'll add that. Who seconded it?
What groups are those?
Well,
Sorry, I think the CEO would like to make a point of clarification.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just if I could provide some officer advice in terms of how council might frame, or rather the mover might frame that amendment. It's really important that we use language like, you know, for example, community groups like blah, because of course there's a large number of them, and we don't want to be overly prescriptive in terms of who we can and can't engage with. So I just think it would be, for completeness, important that we give some examples, but don't limit it to those groups listed. Otherwise we'll be here with quite an extensive motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
So I'll add the words that community groups such as Tascos as an example, okay? And that way the CEO understands. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Continuing? Yep. Lord Mayor, we have a set process, and I'm just referring to another part of the agenda tonight. The City's approach is in accordance with the Council's adopted engagement framework, which I'm sure we're all aware of and we read it regularly, which can be found on the Council website. And we're also a member of the International Association for Public Participation, so I assume we take our membership quite seriously. And we have a professional team of people who conduct these engagement processes. But I do agree with Alderman Zuko that, yep, that's okay, scratch and draw, that we do need to be thorough, and we will make sure that we cover all those bases, and I'm confident that the professional staff will you know, spread the what do you call it, the engagement process as wide as necessary.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I think one driver of this project right at the start was the heights debate, and we were assured at the time, and I was quite cynical about it, that the heights part of it would come back very quickly, within a year. However, look, I think the outcome of this this plan, the discussion paper, is good, and I like the way it's set out. It's easy to read. It has identified all the things that are important to the city and what we should consider. So I might just, won't rub the wound too much, but I was thinking by this stage we would have a heights limit over that area. But anyway, the other thing is in intergovernment relations, I think half the cost of this has been paid for by the state government. What's the communication strategy when this is launched? Are we obviously will be? Are we going to involve the state government?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and through to you, Alderman Briscoe. Certainly, in terms of our protocol, we'd be following that, given that they are funders, as you've rightly said, of this piece of work. So we are including them in acknowledgement as part of the communication strategy. There was also an invitation to the Minister and relevant individuals to attend the launch. They've not been able to attend, but those communications were certainly had over the course of the last few weeks. So they are very pleased with the work to date and have provided their endorsement, but they're unable to participate in the launch itself.
So when is the launch?
Lord Mayor, the launch is tomorrow, again pending council endorsement this evening.
So that launch is invited by everyone on council is invited to that launch?
That's correct, Lord Mayor, as I understand it.
I just don't think it came up in my calendar, but anyway.
No, Lord Mayor, it's because it's still subject to council endorsement tonight.
Okay,
thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, further discussion? No further discussion? I might say a few words. Yeah, I think it's great to get the document out. I do think it marks a bit of a new era for Hobart, or when we agreed to do it with the state government, it did mark a bit of a new era where there was, you know, an understanding from the Minister and the Council of the need to do strategic planning together for such an important place as the CBD or the central part of Hobart. And, you know, I don't think there'd been a lot of strategic planning together, state and local, prior to this project. I think Mr. Noy's nodding, so I think that's correct. And even better that there was we're able to negotiate a contribution from the state government towards this, so that they're actually putting their money in as well as their general support. It is crucial for us to be doing this kind of precinct planning, not just in the CBD, but there are so many other parts of Hobart that if we want to plan well and we want to be on the front foot and be strategic and shaping the city in a way that's well planned and, you know, directed in the public interest and aware of the constraints and the opportunities, then this kind of precinct planning is really essential. And I think this particular precinct plan is one of the few ones that we've seen in Tasmania at all in terms of precinct planning. But precinct planning is something that's very common around nationally and internationally. But I think again, we are really leading the charge in strategic planning in Tasmania, and I think that's something that the council should be very proud of. I did want to just quickly ask, the Hill PDA report that informs this discussion paper is also going to be available on the website, isn't it? As part of the...
Yes, Lord Mayor, the updated, the COVID version of the Hill PDA, that's correct.
Great, because I think that does answer some of the questions that people may have had about the kind of growth scenarios that are based in fact and based in research and evidence, and the kind of floor space requirements that will lead to. And I think it does show that in terms of heights, there's plenty of room for the growth that we're going to see within this particular period within both our current planning scheme rules and also the Woolly approved rules. So I think there's some good material in there that does, help the folks that are interested in the height debate, but also the important thing about this project is it doesn't just focus our city development plans around height, but also thinks about character and which parts of the city are going to be good for which types of development. And the thing that I think is most exciting is the idea of the 5 district neighbourhoods, and also really doing what we can to kind of shape and generate more more residential, more residents living in the city, particularly in some of those really underutilised areas at the moment. So it really does, is the start of a discussion. This isn't the end, this is really the start of the discussion, and I'm hoping that the paper and the activities that I think the staff are planning, quite in-depth range of activities, will build on this and add to the richness going into what will be the eventual precinct plan, which I think comes back to us early next year, which, yeah, as Alderman Briscoe has noted, it is time that we get this piece of work completed, and but I think this is the first really good step in the process, and there's obviously been a lot of work done to get to this discussion paper stage. So thanks everyone who's been involved. Deputy Lord Mayor, did you want to sum up at all? Yeah. So we've got the amendment from Alderman Zerko, seconded by Alderman Barakis. All those in favour say aye.
I think it was not the
Thomas, sorry. Thomas, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Now, did you want to sum up at all, Deputy Lord Mayor?
I think everybody's on the same page with this, Lord Mayor.
Okay. So the substantive recommendation, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okay, item 12 is Tasmanian planning policies. Deputy Lord Mayor?
Yes, I'll move this recommendation, Lord Mayor.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, this was an opportunity for the council to feedback in a certain time frame on the Tasmanian planning provisions, which the government had put forward, and essentially there is a suite of areas that the Tasmanian planning provisions will be covering, and one of those is, I might add, which I think is a very positive thing in relation to planning, is addressing climate change across various topics of this recommendation, or of this paper that's been put out. The proposed format is broadly supported by the council, but should be expanded to note other relevant legislation, state policies and national environment protection measures, and also to guide legislative change where applicable. So there, and higher level components of the land use planning system should also be reviewed. So this really provides us with an opportunity to add various things that might have been missed, such as affordable housing. We're adding affordable and social housing in relation to this. But generally speaking, this will give an overview or various areas that will be considered when the planning provisions are implemented in accordance with the Land Use Planning Approvals Act.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, can I ask a question? Because I'm beginning to think that we've got a few TPPs already, and these ones, the ones that are proposed, have been being promised for decades.
No.
Yes, Lord Mayor. No, we don't have any TPPs. We do have state planning policies, and I think we have a number of state planning policies, limited in number, but these are limited to the Tasmanian planning system itself.
So whilst you're on your feet, through you, Lord Mayor, how are they? Are we just getting? How do they join together, the state PPs and the TPPs?
Yeah, the state planning policies cover a range of legislative provisions, whereas the state planning policy limited to LUPA. So they'll relate to have some bearing on regional land use strategies and clearly planning schemes, whereas the state policies are much broader and would cover a range of legislative regulatory frameworks that exist across the state.
So when we assess a planning application through our planning scheme, or then we'll have to consider these.
Yeah, Chair. Look, the idea is that the any planning scheme developed would accord with these planning policies. So that would be the intent would be to ensure that those, whether it be a regional land use strategy or whether it be an individual planning scheme, that those planning schemes would accord with those planning policies.
But we wouldn't have to go back to these planning policies and assess each planning application against those planning
I don't believe so, but Ms Hogue might be able to comment further.
No, they're not self-executing. They only come into play when so a regional land use strategy has to be in accordance with the Tasmanian planning policies, and then when the state planning provisions are approved, if there are any new ones of those, they also have to be in accordance, as does the local provision schedule. But the development applications underneath them, they just have to be in accordance with the planning scheme.
Right.
That's how state policies work currently.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Tasmanian planning policies will be the same.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Perhaps at a planning committee, I might ask whether if resourcing allows to do a flow chart or some kind of chart, because it is getting a bit complicated, and I know there were moves to increase the state SPPs, but now they've got it appears they'll have a whole suite of TPPs, and how they all. I think how you've explained it, it's understandable, but I'd still like it on paper. Thank you. But I'll ask that in the planning committee.
Thanks, Alderman Briscoe. Further discussion? Councillor Sherlock? No. Okay, no further discussion. I'll put all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 13 is Sustainable Building Program. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is, I'll move the Sustainable Building Program that it does not, it isn't pursued as per the motion before us.
Seconded by Councillor Fox.
Lord Mayor, this was brought to council in relation to so it was brought, I think, as a notice of motion, and it's been on the books for quite some time. So environmental upgrade finance is available in some Australian states where the owner of a property enters into an environmental upgrade agreement, which creates an agreement between a commercial property owner, an installer, a lender, a council, and usually a facilitator company, of which the best known is the Better Building Finance Group. I don't know if the CEO's had experience with this. Maybe you can provide some examples of how well or not it might have worked. And essentially, the advice is that we don't go ahead with this at this point, and that other things will be presented to council as part of the continued rollout of the Sustainable Hobart Action Plan. Now, whether that, and I'd really like to be guided by the CEO, whether the Sustainable Hobart Action Plan and this kind of scheme really crosses, I'd like to ask that question. Is it likely that the things contained in our strategy would actually cover this fund? Through you, Lord Mayor.
CEO.
Through you, Lord Mayor, that's my understanding. I think the issue here really relates to the level of appetite from a state government perspective about their support of this program. So the recommendation here is that we don't pursue it at this time. However, it's something that we'll continue to keep a watching brief on, and as we build up our own evidence base and our own sort of strategy, really implementation in regards to sustainable Hobart, we'll be in a better position to work alongside government to participate in these sorts of programs into the future. But it was just seen as a bit premature at this stage given where we're at in our journey, and also we do need a state government investment in order to promote and actively pursue these sorts of opportunities.
Yes.
Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for that explanation, because I mean in some ways it seems like a very good idea. Probably I think it might have been former Alderman Cocker who might have put this forward, and perhaps he was ahead of the game a little bit in relation to this.
Further discussion? No further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 14 is monthly building statistics.
Move those, Lord Mayor.
Second by Councillor Fox. Any discussion? No. That all those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 15, monthly planning statistics.
Move that, Lord Mayor.
Second by Councillor Fox. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 16 is a motion by myself, so I will hand over the chair to Deputy Lord Mayor. Do you want to come up here or do you want to stay put?
I'm happy to stay here if that's okay with the meeting. Yep. Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So thank you for this. So this motion, which you've all received and is in the agenda, it is about recognising the changing shape of policy in this space and getting to zero carbon and the targets that are required to meet this goal. I want to, before I go on, actually recognise the work that we've done as an organisation in this space over many years. But it is important to acknowledge that we have to keep up to speed with new developments that are happening in this space in Tasmania, nationally and around the world. The motivation for the motion really was the Premier's recent announcement, because and the first point of the motion really is to recognise and support the Tasmanian Premier and his recently announced plan to introduce net zero targets into law. Net zero target by 2030, and for that to be introduced into law.
Sorry,
Lord
Mayor,
Mayor.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
I'll second it, Lord Mayor.
Seconded. Thank you.
Alderman Thomas.
Maybe I need to go up into that big chair.
No.
The chair's over there. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. To recognise and support the Tasmanian Premier and his recently announced plan to introduce into law as net zero target by 2030. Now this is this is really a strong leadership stance, and I think as a capital city it's important and incumbent on us that we get behind the Premier in this target. Now, if we are to if the state is to meet the Premier's target and to meet it right across the entire economy, it is going to require quite a huge range of new laws and new standards if we're going to meet this right across all sectors of the economy. And the Premier has said that's what he wants to do. He doesn't just want this to be a target met through changes in land use. So that is the goal he's set, and that's something to be applauded. But it is going to require some quite significant shifts in policy and thinking in all sectors, including in the local government sector and including us here in Hobart. As my motion and the rationale explains, 47% of Tasmania's energy sector emissions, and that comes from burning gas and diesel and petrol, which we still do in Tasmania, happens in Greater Hobart. So that's nearly half of our Tasmania's energy sector emissions are happening here in Greater Hobart, and a bit over 10% here in the city of Hobart. A large proportion of these emissions, of the emissions generated by the industrial sector, so that's things like the production of cement and also the refrigerants, is also for the activity occurring in Greater Hobart, particularly given all of the growth that we're experiencing. And then of course there's the waste sector and the emissions generated in the waste sector, again, because Southern Tasmania and Greater Hobart is the biggest population centre, again that's there is still growth of emissions in the waste sector. So we do need to understand how we can help to meet the Premier's target. We need to understand what the implications of this target are on our own work, on our own businesses and on our own community. And we also need to understand the potential opportunities for the city from this target. So it's not all just potential work to be done. There is potentially, being the capital city of a state with this kind of very strong leadership target, may help us attract investment. It may help us attract funding, new funding from carbon reduction initiatives that we haven't even sort of explored yet. So clearly this is a huge area of public interest at the moment, and there is rapidly shifting policy space. Just this morning we've seen that the net zero by 2050 looks as though that's going to become much more strongly adopted at the national level, and I expect there'll be further shifts within months in that space. So this motion acknowledges all of this changing policy. It says that we're interested in this issue, that we're keen to adapt, and this motion also says that we're keen to be part of this change. It also seeks updated advice from our CEO on what this shifting policy space means for our work and our community, and how we can be part of the solution.
Thank you. And so you're talking about not only corporate but community targets as well, and work. Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Look, it is net zero, and Tasmania became net zero in 2016. So the goal that the Premier has set is not an ambitious goal, because Tasmania is already net zero. I'd like to think that Tasmania had a goal of being a positive sink for carbon dioxide. And so rather than just saying net zero, because obviously we have tremendous agriculture and forestry and so on that does absorb carbon, and that balances out the emissions we have from the other sources, emissions of carbon. So we are net zero already. So it's not a big challenge to get net zero. So it's very easy for the Premier to say net zero. I think we should become a net positive absorber of carbon dioxide, and that's leadership. Just going along and saying yes, we agree with net zero by 2030. We're already achieving it. If we just say that, it's not leadership. I'm going to support the motion because I think the intent is good, to align with the state government. But from now on, I won't be saying net zero. We could be one of the sinks of carbon dioxide for Australia, and let's be it. We have been with hydropower, which is still a significant contribution to the energy in Tasmania. Whilst 40% of that electricity goes into the zinc works and Camalco, it's still green energy. It's not burning coal. So all I can, and with all the recent rains, I don't think we'll be burning gas for producing electricity in the next year or so. So I congratulate you, Lord Mayor, for introducing this motion, but it is trying to get some good rapport with the state government. But again, as I said, we should be looking at being a net carbon dioxide absorber.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Further discussion?
Yeah, just a question through you. I did say I was going to second that, but was it Alderman Thomas that seconded, or was it me?
That's what I saw. Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't see Alderman Thomas.
Well, it's only because I wanted to move a small amendment, but maybe someone else might take it up. Lord Mayor, I support this. The only question I have, and I just need clarification, because It does say here that the CEO undertake an assessment and provide recommendations. I understand that, but there's nowhere in this motion that says that a report's got to come back to council. Normally, notices of motion are relevant to a report coming back to council. So could someone please, who hasn't spoken, get up and ensure that the words "a report come back to council" be added to the motion, or Lord Mayor, if you'd like to put it in there somewhere, I'm prepared to accept it, because I understand it only just says undertake an assessment and provide recommendations, but notices of motion need to come back in a report form. So that's the clarification I need. If someone can either move an amendment, or if the Lord Mayor can add it in as the seconder, I can accept it. Is that correct?
So put that in part 3, Lord Mayor.
Well, so I guess so where it says request that the CEO undertake an assessment and provide recommendations back to council
As part of a report back to council, as that.
part of a report.
Do that, and the seconders.
I'm happy to
You're
accept
happy?
that,
Yep,
Ian,
okay.
that's fine, thank you very much,
Any-
nice and easy.
Any further comments? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. What I'm looking forward to is seeing the details of the legislation that the Premier has proposed. So I don't think we have that yet. So can I just clarify, the legislation has not been tabled yet with the full details of this?
Lord Mayor, do you know?
No.
I think it's out for comment. I think it's
Okay,
out.
well, I need to check that out. But look, I support this. And just in response to Alderman Briscoe's comment about we already are, don't look so surprised, that we already are net zero. And yes, we have been, but that's because we've offset, as I think you might have mentioned, offset it with forestry operations in Tasmania. But what I'm hopeful for is that this legislation looks, and the Premier has mentioned it's sector-based stuff as well, because we do have high levels of emissions in Tasmania from various sectors, and one of those sectors we could call local government. You know, the transport fleet, waste. So they're the areas I'm interested in how we get those sectors to net zero. And beyond that, if it's possible, if we could turn waste into something else without burning it, you know, potentially there's opportunity to do as Alderman Briscoe has suggested, that we become a, you know, net positive when it comes to emissions. That's a different level, and I'm not sure which sectors could achieve that, but there's a lot of things that will be going on in the next few years. Hopefully we'll have good news coming out of COP26 in Glasgow that really puts us on a trajectory to reduce carbons in Australia. We've still got to get, you know, a commitment. Well, we've still got to see what the Prime Minister says in Glasgow, but hopefully he won't renege and he will stick with a 2050 commitment for zero emissions for Australia. But we're also realising that 2050 is probably too late, and the real target should be by 2035, if not earlier. So anyway, coming back to this particular motion, I'm supportive of it. Thank you for bringing it forward. I look forward to what the CEO brings back to us about how we can accelerate some of the things that we're hoping to do. And the other component is I'm hopeful that the Premier will acknowledge our commitment and acknowledge the fact that we're supportive of, well, we hopefully will be very supportive of what he's proposing, even though I haven't read it yet, and that they might consider how they can assist us with achieving some of those targets as a sector, and as also a capital city, because we know that most emissions in Australia come from our cities. That's where we all live, that's where most of us live, that's where most of the cars are, that's where industry occurs. So cities have a big responsibility in reducing emissions, and hopefully the Premier and also the Minister for Climate Change, which I think is Minister Yench, can also support Hobart in helping to achieve some more accelerated outcomes when it comes to reducing our emissions. And one of the things I'd love to see is the Minister say, well, we'd be happy to see some trials of electric commercial vehicles within councils, not ones that go up hills, that might be a bit too challenging, but ones that can work on the flat. So just as a goodwill gesture from the state government, from the Minister, to come and help us in our journey towards being a really zero emissions council.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Data.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to endorse all the statements that's been made, and I also want to thank the Lord Mayor for bringing this up. I commend you for that. And I think it is imperative that this is legislated. So I also want to commend the Premier for bringing this about. If you want to use the word leadership, that is debatable, and I quite agree with Alderman Briscoe, and I think that's for another debate. But I think it is very, very important for us to support this, and I totally support this. And I think it's a very crucial matter for humanity, and for us to move and not have a myopic view that it is only rubbish rates and roads. But under the legislation, section 20 and 28, we are given these powers and for functioning that we extend to the best interest of the community. And I think this vote, this motion, in a number of elements suggests this, and I thank you so much, and I support this totally. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Sherlock?
No, thank you. Thanks.
Okay. I also support this motion and are happy with the amendment that's been put in by Alderman Zuko, or suggested by Alderman Zuko. This is a chance to really work hard in addressing greenhouse gas emissions within our city, and as it's already been stated, cities are one of the main producers, and we're talking about Greater Hobart when we look at the EZ or the Near Star, whatever it's called now, and some of those industries. However, transport is a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and of course in our city. So some of our city shaping things that we've been talking about today can actually knock a lot of the carbon emissions on its head with our planning as we go forward for the inner city in response to inner city living. So reducing cars, looking the number of cars, reducing the amount of cars required in each development application may be something that can eventually have that flow-on effect of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So quite a good response, or a move in the right direction for the federal government to say that they'll take a position of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, or net zero by 2050, but too slow is my feeling, and this is a positive response from the state government, but also a leadership position from this council as well in relation to this. It was just this morning that the Grattan Institute released their report about practical policies for cleaner transport and better cities. And there are emissions targets that they're suggesting, and reducing the use of petrol powered cars and diesel, and there are simple ways to improve to lower carbon emissions. So there's plenty of things that can be done immediately, but we need the political will. And hopefully with the discussions that we do have with the Premier and the Minister Jensch, we can look at addressing some of those things. Would you like to sum up, Lord Mayor?
Yes, I will, thank you. So thanks for the discussion around the table and the positive feedback, which I really do appreciate, and I think it is really important for us as a capital city to acknowledge the Premier's target, and to, I guess, harness that for the benefit of the city, for the benefit of residents, for the benefit of the business community. I wanted to just speak about the fact that Tasmania is already net zero, and therefore this isn't this supposedly, the suggestion by Alderman Briscoe that this maybe isn't as ambitious as it could be. And I partly agree with that observation, but I want to just point out that that the target isn't in law, and that it is being proposed to be put into law. The Premier is also saying that he is planning to put in sectoral targets and sectoral plans, and I think that's really what will make the difference in the next 9 years, because unfortunately emissions are going up in Tasmania in all sectors, except in land use change, and really the government has benefited from quite a large drop in the forests being logged since 2010, and that has basically led to this accounting benefit that we are now net zero. But transport emissions have increased by 17%, other energy, use of gas and diesel in other industrial processes has increased, the construction sector and the materials of construction has increased, and as has waste. So they're all things that we will have a role in, and Tasmania's population is going up and there's a lot of construction activity. So to actually ensure that that net zero result continues into the future, or we can actually meet it in 2030, will require some effort, either to reduce forestry even more, which might be an option, but I am hopeful that the Premier is serious about actually trying to drive stronger transition in the other sectors, because if we don't, we will be, and we only rely on the forestry, we will be left behind what is now becoming something that is happening all over the world. So I think this is a really good signal for the staff and for the state government that the council's interested in keeping up to date with this, updating our policy advice and hopefully leading the way, working closely with the state government.
Thank you. So I put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried unanimously.
Great, thank you. Item 17 is the proposed 2022 Council and Committee meeting schedule. Alderman Zuko.
I wasn't a committee.
Councillor Coates was, so...
would someone like to move it?
Happy to move it.
Alderman, Councillor Harvey, seconded by Alderman Thomas, I think. Would anyone like to speak to it? I think it's fairly self-explanatory. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 18 is the Heritage Account Committee. Did you want to say something, Councillor Sherlock? No. Item 18, Heritage Account Committee. Who's going to introduce this item? Who was at the meeting?
Who was at finance?
Alderman Thomas.
I'll move the motion on the books. It's self-explanatory in terms of getting the financial expertise to assist that committee in its important works.
Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 19, 2021 financial statements. Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Item 19, financial statements. The council note in accordance with the section 84.4 of the Local Government Act that the CEO, being the General Manager, as appointed by the Council pursuant of section 61 of the Local Government Act, tables and certifies financial statements for the year, marked attachment A, and to item 4.1 of the Special Finance Committee. The Finance Committee today recommended, Lord Mayor, that the Council note in accordance with the section that it accepts the report, and I so move. Second. Lord Mayor, I'd just like to make some comments in regards to these financial statements. One of the most, there's a number of important components here. Our cash reserves are sort of up near the $38 million mark, which is what we can say doubled, but that's relevant to the fact that we got a $15 million interest-free loan for 3 years. And I've got to say, anyone in business who is offered a loan, whether it's $1 or $15 million, to have it for 3 years, would have to draw it down, and basically that's why that component is. And mind you, who knows, we might make a few dollars out of it if we just leave it there and let it sit there and get some interest out of it. So that's actually a benefit. There are also some other components in regards to this, Lord Mayor, that we've sort of in a better position of nearly $12 million. Nearly $8 million of that $12 million, Lord Mayor, has to do with the rates base, and that's all relevant, Lord Mayor, to the increase in the valuation base. Earlier in the evening, at the committee meeting, I spoke to our manager at accounts. I'm sorry, I've just gone blank for a second. And I asked the question in regards to whether the majority of the component, I don't want to ask the question again, I think it's irrelevant, a number of elected members were, and the answer was that most of it's come from the commercial sector, in which I'd like to make a point in the reference that the revaluations of any property, whether it's residential or commercial, increases our bottom line. This demonstrates that our bottom line has been increased by $8 million because of the revaluations. But it also demonstrates that the importance of our commercial CBD sector, all the commercial sectors are very important, but at the heart of our city, which is our CBD, is very imperative to ensure that we have a continued rate base that's on the up rather than on the down. And I've actively been very, very active in respect of saying how important our city heart is. Because every empty shop, every empty upper story shop top, every empty office space detracts from the valuations of the city. So that the more we have people coming to the city, whether they shop, whether they live, whether they work, and everything, is so imperative to the bottom line of this council, which has been demonstrated by this $8 million windfall in respect of our budget. Lord Mayor, the other part of the budget, which I've got to commend the hard work of our officers, is the other $4 million. We actually have challenged our staff over the last few years in respect of sharpening their pencils, and I've got to commend the CEO and our staff for their hard work in that domain, and I thank the staff for their work. It's very, very important that the staff feel that they have contributed to reducing the debt, reducing the costs associated with this council. In any business, and I know in my businesses and all the businesses I've operated over the past years, we are always looking at that bottom line, looking at where we can save money, and our staff can be commended. The other component, Lord Mayor, is the COVID-19 savings from those people that didn't put requests in, which was great, because we saved some dollars there. In all, Lord Mayor, I think we also we've got to be happy with the report from the Tasmanian Audit Office, which has given us some really good news. And I'll just read one section. In my opinion, the accompanying financial report presents fairly all the material aspects council's financial position as of 30th of June 2021 and its financial performance and cash flows for the year then ended. In accordance with the Local Government Act, it meets the Australian accounting standards. So, Lord Mayor, we should also commend our staff and ourselves for ensuring that this council has gone through proper process. Lord Mayor, all I can say is that what we need to be doing is saying to our staff and giving them the ability to go out and sell this city in a positive light. And I've stated this time and time again. We have many clients. Our residents, community organisations, the commercial sector, the retail sector, and the list goes on. We are a provider of service, and we need to demonstrate that we can deliver customer service. If we do that, we can bring more people into this city, which will help our bottom line and our rate base.
Thank you, Alderman Zuko. Further discussion? Lord Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, this report is obviously something that we as a council need to do, and some of those accounting notes are there for the as part of the report. I'd like to also commend the work that our finance crew do to bring this up to the standards that is acceptable for the audit office, and of course the risk and audit panel looked at this last week. I'm not a fan of large amounts of debt, even though it might be cheap money. It's still debt. So I think that we need to be prudent in relation to how that debt is serviced and how we continue to work through things. Whilst the ELT, the Executive Leadership Team, and various council officers have worked with the GM and the CEO in relation to reducing spending, looking at ways of reducing the impacts that we felt from COVID. At the same time as being kind to our community and to our businesses and all manner of those facets of community that Alderman Zuko has already spoken about. It has the impact of well, what do we cut and what do we keep going. So again, we have to make sure that we are providing the services that are required for this council to function, and obviously we're going through some review of that with our new CEO, and I look forward to seeing how we tackle those financial obligations and obligations to provide services to the community.
Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, I congratulate the officers yet again for doing such a good job with the reports. Just as a comment, I wasn't going to speak, but we did a few years ago commit to borrow money to do much needed infrastructure, and whilst personally I don't like debt, I pay off my credit card debt the day I incur the debt, so I hate debt personally, but an organisation at this size and this income can have debt because we're trying to give intergenerational fairness. So we have facilities that are being funded. Should they all be funded by this generation, or should the burden of that funding be spread over the generations? And that's a high level debate that we have every time in the past we've gone to borrow money. And I agree with if someone would like to lend me $3 million for 3 years, interest free, I'm happy for you to offer it to me. It won't be a bribe. I'll do good things with it, and I'll give it at the end of 3 years. I'll give it back to them, and I might have put a bit of money aside. So all I can say is that the intergenerational fairness means that sometimes you do have to borrow money, and that's clearly a role we have to become fairly comfortable with.
Okay, there's no further discussion. Yeah. Oh, Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, look, like Alderman Briscoe, I also wasn't going to speak, but because we've had the chairman speak so with such breadth. I think we're in a hiatus, to be quite honest. What Alderman Zuko spoke about is totally correct. But if one looks at our CBD at the moment, it is a shell. There are shops that have been empty for months, major retail space that has been empty for months. On the days we've had, and in fact, thank heavens Wednesday is a sunny day, we haven't had much sunshine lately, but if you go to that city, on most of the days we've had at the moment, it is a grimy, very disappointing atmosphere. The whole feel of the place is lacklustre. Despite what all the work's been done in here, I think we should treat this as a very clear warning that the mix of what's going to be in our CBD and our near CBD over the next 4 or 5 years has not yet been determined. Just like they used to say the jobs of 2025 probably haven't been developed back even as recent as 2018. I think what is going to happen in our CBD, we have very little understanding. It's no different to Parramatta, to Geelong and other places. We are missing a committee for Hobart, so that doesn't help us for a start. Every other city, there's 26 committees for economic development around the nation, in fact, around Australasia. We decided not to have one of those a few years back, and we're missing it. But we do not have the mix, and there's a lot of learnings to come from cities like Geelong, potentially Adelaide, and other areas, because they are now looking at what CBDs are going to look like in not just in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. And we will need, through our excellent CEO and the team, to start looking at that, because it's totally right. We've had a boom through revaluations, and that's been the same. I mean, Clarence must be loving it right now with all of those, with the residential work that's going on over there. Even small councils are benefiting now. But we have a warning, Lord Mayor, and right now that warning is sitting there in every vacant shop. And there's no pop-up shops happening in many places. We have got space that has been now vacant for well over 12 months in some cases. We've got retailers in Sandy Bay, which was a great thing. We had 2 major retailers go there 3 or 4 years ago. One has departed. We have got a significant issue on our hands. Fair call to everyone who's prepared this report. It is part and parcel of a good operation. But right now, through the work of the CEO, the Economic Development Committee, the Finance Committee, etc., we have got a big job on our hands.
Further discussion? I might make a few points. Yeah, I think a very good result, much more positive on the financial statements than we had been forecasting, so that's really positive. And I will acknowledge, as I mentioned in the committee, that part of that was through a sort of almost a surprise revaluation from the Hobart Hospital, which was a great windfall for us. I do want to pick up Alderman Thomas on the CBD message, because I think while there's some, you know, obviously there is vacant properties in this Hobart CBD, the commercial vacancy rate in the Hobart CBD is the lowest of all of the capital cities. So there's less vacancies in Hobart than any other capital city in the country. That's from the Property Council's annual data, and so in 2020, beginning of 2021, we were the best performing CBD in terms of low vacancies, which doesn't mean that you know, all CBDs in Australia and around the world are changing, and I think Alderman Thomas is right when he says there is change happening, and that's exactly why I think the work that we're doing through a CBD, our Central Hobart Precincts Plan, is exactly the kind of hard work and thinking that Alderman Thomas is alluding to, that we are launching that discussion paper tonight, because that is actually saying, well, you know, retail isn't our, you know, retail is changing dramatically. It's changing dramatically around the world. Shop fronts are becoming incredible, sort of a very different beast. They aren't the same as they used to be. They are sort of more of a showpiece for an online shop, and the online piece is really important in retail now. But it does mean that we have to look at the other alternatives, like more residents, 7,000 more residents projected to be in the CBD in the next 20 years as a result of our precinct plan. What was the other thing? And the university, obviously. The university's moved to the city. Some people don't agree with it, but it is potentially an incredible pipeline of investment and will bring a different use to the city that doesn't necessarily rely on the traditional sort of big box department stores that perhaps were much more a feature of the old Hobart CBD. We'll still enliven the city. So I think there's always work to be done. There's work to be done for any council that is overseeing a CBD during a pandemic and during this incredible time of change with retail. But I do think when you do look at the numbers, and we could do with more economic data. I think we could do with some more data about footfall and use of credit cards, which I know some cities have access to that data, so that we could really understand what's happening. I do want to just point out that our vacancy rate, while it looks bad in some places, is actually a very healthy, quite low vacancy rate at the moment. And I do just want to, before I finish, also just thank all of the finance staff and all of their hard work, because they've been on the phone to people who are seeking different rate relief, and they're working with them and thinking about the income and doing all of that hard work of balancing the books and providing that really solid advice. So it's really important to thank them as well.
Sorry, Lord.
Further discussion.
Question, Lord Mayor, just jumping off one of the comments that you made, and I'm through you to the CEO or whoever relevant person to answer the question is, and it might be one that needs to be taken on notice. Can we get a breakdown, I suppose, of the commercial vacancy rate in the CBD over the last, say, 5 years? Because I think it's more important to compare apples with apples rather than compare what's going on in other cities.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and through to you, Alderman, we can certainly do that. Thanks.
Okay, did you want to sum up?
Yeah, I just want to start with that very, very quickly. Lord Mayor, I take note that you have pointed out that we may have the lowest CBD occupancy rate in the country.
No, vacancy.
Vacancy rate in the capital cities.
So there's a lot of demand.
Lord Mayor, we are elected members of the City of Hobart. Our primary goal is the City of Hobart. I actually had a discussion with someone today in regards to the fact that we sometimes compare Hobart with Melbourne, Hobart with Geelong, Hobart with... You know what? We need to compare Hobart with Eastlands, Hobart with Kingborough, and Hobart with Glenorchy. Because that is what we need to compare ourselves with, not Melbourne or Sydney or any other capital city. Because we have a less vacancy rates as Melbourne, I don't care about that, because I don't live in Melbourne. I live in Hobart. My responsibility is Hobart. The mere mention under the precinct plan that we can have 7,000 more people living in Hobart is something I've got to say the Deputy and I have been advocating for quite a number of years. We've been trying and pushing the barrow. The more residential development we can get on an empty parcel of land in the CBD of Hobart, Lord Mayor, means that our rate base will go up again, which will assist us dramatically. And the precinct plan, as you well mentioned, Lord Mayor, and I can remember that debate in here being so nasty, but then tonight we get unanimous support for it, because we want the big picture for this city. And I've got to say, Lord Mayor, we've got to stop comparing apples with bananas, because Hobart is the City of Hobart. The other cities, to my point of view, outside of Hobart, and I'm not saying it in a detrimental way, Lord Mayor, are the bananas, Hobart is the apple, and we've got to make sure that our apple here is well taken care of.
Okay, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 20 is the Parks and Recreation Committee. I'll invite Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I move the motion on the books about the annual maintenance grants to our facilities, Tasmanian Hockey Centre, the main tennis centre and the Hobart Netball and Sports Centre. I move it.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis.
Now, I know our previous speaker was mentioning things. While I was writing some notes to myself what to speak about, I was thinking roads, rubbish and roads, rates and rubbish is our core business, but recreation is the other. So it should be 4 R's actually. Roads, rates, rubbish and recreation. Each of these major sporting facilities are developed by the clubs on council-owned land and the subject of long-term lease agreements with the council. Each of the lessees do an excellent job of maintaining the facilities. It is a great value to the city to have these facilities managed by the organisations who are professionals in the sports, and activities they run are more focused on maximising the use of facilities and providing recreational opportunities. We should be very proud of those 3 facilities. So each dollar the city provides to assist maintenance, because it's only assisting maintenance, allows for that dollar to be reinvested in the sport that allows greater opportunities for residents. It is a condition of the grants that the funding must be spent on the maintenance of a capital asset, whereas demonstrate the work undertaken will extend the life of that asset. So obviously the motion is seeking approval of nearly $160,000 worth of maintenance grants to those 3 organisations. And if you've ever, or we all have visited those 3 facilities, you know almost every day of the week they're almost chock-a-block full of participants. So it is a good asset to the city. And something that we should be very proud of, and the relatively small amount of money we give them as maintenance grants, I think it's money well spent.
Further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. So that brings to a close the open portion of our meeting. If someone could moved by Alderman Zuko, seconded by Alderman Barakis, that we move into the closed. All those in favour say aye. Against say no.